All right. Welcome back, Peter.
Yes, welcome back, James.
Once again.
Yeah.
We had a dud start recording now, but first time remote recording, so there's going to be some glitches, but I think we'll figure them out.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, podcast number 17, Letters from a Stoic by, I don't actually know what the correct pronunciation is, but it's Lucius Seneca, but most people just call him Seneca.
Okay.
Should I give us a very, very quick book summary?
Yes, please.
Cool. Okay, so Letters from a Stoic by Seneca is a collection of letters addressed to Lucilius, but intended for a public audience. The letters use different aspects of daily life to reflect on philosophical ideas, reflecting on those ideas through a Stoic lens. And that's pretty much it. Because there's so many different letters and they're all so different that it's kind of impossible to give a summary other than saying that it's a book discussing philosophical ideas. Yeah.
Cool.
So, I don't know if you want to start with the first letter in the book, but the second letter so I think that there's 124 letters or something along those lines in total.
Yeah.
But this book is a subset of those. It's like a chosen selection because we're reading the Collins Classics version. I can kick us off with that if you're happy.
Yeah, you can.
All right. So on discursiveness in reading, so a different word for discursiveness is wandering. So if you're going from one topic to another without a clear focus.
Yeah.
And he says here, the primary indication to my thinking of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company. You must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works. When a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends by having many acquaintances, but no friends. And the same thing must hold true of men who seek intimate acquaintance with no single author, but visit them all hastily and in a hurried manner. Food does no good, and is not assimilated into the body if it leaves the stomach as soon as it is eaten. Nothing hinders a cure as much as frequent change of medicine. A plant which is often moved can never grow strong. Reading many books is a distraction. And then he goes on to say, you should always read standard authors, and when you crave a change, fall back upon those whom you've read before. Each day acquiring something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against any other misfortunes as well. And after you have run over many thoughts, select one to be thoroughly digested that day. This is my own custom. From the many things which I have read, I claim one part for myself. The thought for today I discovered in Epicurus. He says, contented poverty is an honorable estate. Indeed, if it be contented, it is not poverty at all. It is not a man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. And then he finally concludes with, what is the proper limit to wealth? It is first to have what is necessary, and second to have what is enough. Farewell. So, in this letter, sorry, I'm jumping through a bunch of things that I've just underlined. Yeah. So that's not the letter in full. If someone wants to read it, it's actually in the public domain online in like wiki. It's like wiki source or something like that. Or they can get the book. But yeah, I think it's a nice idea and a helpful one to just realize that it doesn't really help one to just jump between tons of different things. In this case, he's using reading. Yeah. But I think that applies for many things in life. We want to stick with something for a decent amount of time. Yeah. To be able to digest it, is the one example or metaphor.
I think it's just it's like the whole thing of you cannot have many masters. It's like one of those saying, you
Yeah.
you kind of need to focus on one thing at any given time. So you cannot, like, I mean, the example, you cannot juggle between different books. You then not grasp idea that's trying to be put forth by one of them.
Yeah. And we often do like want to just jump around because it's difficult to actually put a lot of time and effort into a single thing because it gets boring at times.
Yeah. I think
So, Yeah, interesting. And I like that part where he says a plant which is often moved can never grow strong.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. I think to keep. Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to move on to the next one? True and false friendship.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so on page 5, Peter, just jump in at any point if you want to comment on a letter or read something. But otherwise, I'll just read through the parts that are highlighted in the true and false friendship.
Yeah, I would jump in on that. Yeah.
Okay, so perfect. So he says here, but if you consider any man a friend whom you do not trust as yourself, you are mightily mistaken, and you do not sufficiently understand what true friendship means. Then he goes on to say, ponder for a long time whether you shall admit a given person into your friendship. But when you have decided to admit him, welcome him with all your heart and soul. Regard him as loyal, and you will make him loyal. There's a class of men who communicate to anyone whom they meet matters which should be revealed to friends alone, and unload upon the chance listener whatever irks them. Others, again, fear to confide in their closest inmates, and, if it were possible, they would not trust even themselves, burying their secrets deep in their hearts. But we should do neither. It is equally faulty to trust in everyone and to trust in no one.
Yeah, I think that last point of it's equally faulty to trust everyone and trust no one. Yeah, I mean, you might need to question yourself if you have no one around, to trust, even as an outsider, maybe it's coming from a judgment point. If, someone that confidently say they have no friends, that says a lot about who they are as a person, So, yeah, I think that's just one thing I've come to learn over time,
Yeah.
But yeah, and same as...
Yeah, you have to be able to confide... Sorry, I think there's a small delay.
Yeah,
but carry on.
Yeah, and, no, I was just saying, again, at the same time, you also need to be able to discern who you're able to trust the most. You cannot, like it said, you cannot trust everyone and trust no one. There has to be a balance. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we need to be able to trust people and communicate with people. And it's like you said, it's faulty to be like, I don't trust anyone. But at the same time, to go and just spew secrets to anyone who will listen is also not a good idea. But you should, if you call someone a true friend, then you should be able to really trust them and tell them pretty much anything. Yeah.
I agree.
Cool. We go on to the next one.
Yeah.
So the next one is on page 7. It's letter 5, which is on the philosopher's mean. So like on the philosopher's middle ground, I guess. It says, you make each day your endeavor to become a better man. Then on the next page he carries on to say, philosophy calls for plain living, but not for penance, and we may perfectly well plan and neat at the same, and we may perfectly well be plain and neat at the same time. This is the mean of which I approve. Our life should observe a happy medium between the ways of the sage and the ways of the world at large. All men should admire it, but they should understand it also. He is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware. It is the sign of an unstable mind not to be able to endure riches. So, I think Seneca wasn't too, well, I think he was quite well off. And so I think the comment at the end there is one that kind of sheds a bit of light on to his state of mind, I guess, where he says, but it's equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware. So earthenware, I think, was like the cheap plates and dishes and things like that of their time. But we either get things that are super fancy, and then we kind of just put them in a super safe place, and we don't use them, and we care way too much for them, and then when we have things that are cheap, we wish we had the expensive things, and we aren't happy with the cheap things. And he's saying, basically, if you have the cheap things, treat them as if they were the fancy things. And if you have the fancy things, treat them as if they were the cheap things. It's not to neglect them and stuff, but they are just things at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it briefly. It's just when we actually then get those expensive things and we tend not to use them because we think of how expensive they are and we don't want to ruin them, which takes away the joy of why we actually got them in the first place, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. And that often happens with me. Like, I'll buy something super fancy and then just not want to use it because I've spent so much money on. I remember at one stage I got a MacBook Air, and I used to use it at home, but I would hardly use it because I was worried that I'd break it or something like that. And then I remember going away somewhere, and then I didn't want to take it with, so I left it at home because I didn't want it to get in the plane. Often people will put luggage on top of your luggage and stuff, and I didn't want it to crush the laptop and crack the screen or something like that because it's such a thin laptop. But it's so silly because so I ended up selling it, and because I just realized that I was never going to actually use this thing properly. But it's so silly to have stuff like that, and then you don't use it. But then you get other people that they'll get it and they'll just use it, and most of the time it doesn't actually break or anything like that. It's a tool to be used, not to sit in a shelf. Yeah. Okay. Should we look at the next one on knowledge sharing, or on sharing knowledge? So on page 10, he has a sentence here. It says, well, I'm going to actually jump through again the same as I did last time.
Okay.
So he says, this very fact is proof that my spirit is altered into something better, that it can see its own faults, of which it was previously ignorant. Nothing will ever please me, no matter how excellent or beneficial, if I must retain the knowledge of it to myself. And if wisdom were given to me under the express condition that it must be kept hidden and not uttered, I should refuse it. No good thing is pleasant to possess without friends to share it. And then he goes on to say, Cleanthes could not have been the express image of Zeno if he had merely heard his lectures. But he shared his life, saw into his hidden purposes, and watched him to see whether he lived according to his own rules. Plato, Aristotle, and the whole throng of sages, who were destined to go on in each his different way, derived more benefit from the character than from the words of Socrates. So, basically, I think what he's getting at is we want to learn and grow, so becoming more aware of our faults. But the thing that we want to also do is we want to learn from people somewhat directly. We don't want to just sort of learn in theory, but we want to actually be around them. And it's kind of like that whole idea of choose your friends wisely, because they will shape you. I
was gonna say this section reminds me also of I think it was 2 books ago when it was talking about that first African American group to join the Navy, and one of the things that one of the concepts of learning better was actually by sharing. So you and like you touched on that, to grow, you just don't acquire knowledge yourself. You actually need to also share or be able to share what it is that you know.
Yeah, I mean, teaching things is the best way to learn.
It's there. Like, I mean, that second part, it's like, I therefore wish to impart to you this sudden changes in myself. Like, that's just one way of that.
Yeah. Cool. Should we go on to the next one? The crowds.
Okay, I didn't touch much on that, but yeah, we can. Okay.
Cool. No, that's chilled. Yeah, so I'll just read the pieces and then we can go through it. He says here in page 12, to consort with a crowd is harmful. There's no person who does not make some vice attractive to us, or stamp it upon us, or taint us unconsciously therewith. Certainly the greater the mob with which we mingle, the greater the danger. But nothing is so damaging to good character as the habit of lounging at the games, for then it is the vice that steals subtly upon one, through the adventure of pleasure. So just a small bit of context before I read, or carry on reading. I think back here in the Greek world, the idea of the games was quite a big thing, right? And if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of you go to this arena and then people fight, and normally fight to the death. And I think it's normally like people who've done bad things and stuff like that. But
for those kind of events, like fighting to the death, it was usually like people that are like in jail or something.
Yeah. So it's kind of a strange foreign thing to us. Hopefully we never see it as not foreign, but yeah, this is the context where he's in, and he seems to have a bit of an aversion, like a dislike for doing that kind of stuff. And he's using it as a commenting, as a sort of background for the crowd's comments. So that's just a bit of context for the stuff that I'll read now. So he says on page 13, the outcome of the very fight is death, and the means are fire and sword. And then he goes on to say, the young character which cannot hold fast to righteousness must be rescued from the mob. It is too easy to side with the majority. So like people watching those kind of things, for example, like everyone is cheering it on and stuff, but actually it's like, what on earth is happening? Yeah. People are murdering each other. Yeah. But if you're with the majority, you just kind of get roped into it. And then he says, much harm is done by a single case of indulgence or greed. The familiar friend, if he be luxurious, weakens and softens us imperceptibly. The neighbor, if he is rich, rouses our covetousness. The companion, if he be slanderous, rubs off some of his rust upon us. Though even though we may be spotless and sincere, when then do you think that the effect will be on character? When the world at large assaults it, you must either imitate or loathe the world, but both courses are to be avoided. You should not copy the bad simply because there are many, nor should you hate the many because they are unlike you. Associate with those who will make you better. Become those whom you yourself can welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach. Yeah. Don't hang out with crowds who do crazy stuff. Is the 7th. But also, yeah,
I
that
mean,
warning of...
Yeah, that warning.
Sorry, go for it, Peter. No, go for it.
No, I'm saying that teaching concept is here again, you know. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think we learn by teaching,
Yeah.
and we grow as people by teaching. And then what I was going to say is that comment of, if you have a friend who's very luxurious, then that often will slowly chew away at us, because we will end up wanting those things too. And if you have someone who's continuously being slanderous, so like, I guess being mean to others or swearing or doing different things like that, then that slowly rubs off on us.
Yeah.
I like the thing that he says, rubs off some of his rust upon us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think we don't use the visual representation of it, you know, when we're explaining it. But if you put it that way, that because it then implies that that person's, I want to say bad, but in air quotes, bad habits also then around. So like that will leave an imprint on you, you know, because if someone rubs against you, their rust will transfer to you. So in essence, you know, you're embodying whatever bad habit it is that they present.
Yeah. And I think also you can like play on that analogy for a while, because once something becomes a bit rusty, it kind of just deteriorates from there.
Yeah.
And you have to work really hard to repair that rust spot and do a really proper job of it so that it's gone completely. And only then will the thing remain and not continue to degrade. But it's also a nice idea, because if you just leave something, it will rust naturally.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a metal that doesn't rust, like aluminium.
No, funny enough, it's a similar concept that was kind of brought up in a letter, in one of the letters later on, where it says, I think it's, just give me a sec. It's the letter to do with quiet and study. So it kind of was on about how, you know, we always want quiet and solitude and whatnot, but then it introduced that whole an idle mind is the devil's playground. That was my understanding of it, that when you idle, that's when you then tend to ponder about all the random ideas that are in your head, and let's be honest, not all of them are the best, and you know, it's very easy to then veer off and to, you know, think, you know, things that aren't good. And like you said, like if you leave something, you know, it is going to rust as well. You know, I just think those two ideas are very closely related, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If yeah, we shouldn't just be idle all the time. I don't think we were made for that. Yeah, it's good to have little periods of rest and that, but long periods not great. So I think maybe we can skip a few letters to letter 16 on page 29, unless you have something between there.
Yeah, it was just in between there. It was, in between that, I just had, but it's something that we've kind of touched on now. It's the whole on philosophy and friendship, you know. There's a section on page 18 that says a man will be attracted by some reward offered in exchange for his friendship. If he is attracted by urgent friendship other than friendship itself. So it's just saying that we kind of have like a reward system in our head, you know, of we kind of I think of it as in we kind of drawn closer to people or like-minded people because I think that kind of stimulation is kind of a reward to others, you know. But sadly, this can also be taken the extreme way where people see reward and just them getting the reward, and then that's why we get, you know, so often when friends are like, oh, he took advantage of me, you know, like, there's that very thin line. I think we just have to be very careful on how we look at that, or the rewards don't have to be harmful to the next person, you know. But yeah, that was just one of the ideas that that came up, and then there was also the blush of modesty as well. But yeah, there wasn't much that I kind of pointed out there. But yeah, it's just it's good just to. I think the concept of modesty is one that that doesn't come naturally to most, you know. But I think we should be able to acknowledge and be able to say confidently what it is that we're good at, you know. And there are times when, you know, as modest as we can be, we actually need to step up and actually say, okay, I'm actually good at this, and actually take the wheel on it. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a balance there.
Yeah.
Just try to not be sort of boastful, but to also be like, okay, I'm capable of doing this, and that's fine to say. But yeah, there's a balance there. Okay, so then going on to philosophy, the guide of life. So that's page 29. He says here, it's more important for you to keep the resolutions that you have already made than to go on to make noble ones, to make new noble ones. You must persevere, and must develop new strength by continuous study until that which is only a good inclination becomes a settled purpose. Then he says, philosophy, it is not pursued in order that the day may yield some amusement before it is spent, or that leisure may be relieved of the tedium that irks us. It molds and constructs the soul. It orders our life and guides our conduct, shows us what we should do and what we should leave undone. It sits at the helm and directs our course as we waver amid uncertainties. Then he goes on to say, if you live according to nature, this is a quote from Epicurus, if you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich. Suppose that the property of many millionaires is heaped in your possession. Assume that fortune carries you far beyond the limits of your private income, decks you with gold, clothes you in purple, and brings you to such a degree of luxury and wealth that you can bury the earth under your marble floors. You will only learn from such things to still crave greater. Natural desires are limited, but those which spring from false opinion can have no stopping point. The false has no limits. When you are traveling a road, there must be an end, but when astray, your wanderings are limitless. Recall your steps, therefore, from idle things, and when you would know whether that which you seek is based upon natural or upon misleading desire. Consider whether it can stop at any definite point. If you find after having travelled far that there is a more distant goal always in view, you may be sure that this is a condition contrary to nature. So, just to reread that one part, when you're travelling on the road, there must be an end, but when astray, your wanderings are limitless. So I think he's kind of saying, because the title is On Philosophy, the Guide of Life, and if we can use philosophy to understand various aspects of life, then we can start to follow on, or we start to realize that natural desires are the things that we should follow. And I don't really fully understand the term natural, but I don't think it's like in this exact same way that we would use the word natural. But kind of maybe I think you could replace it with virtuous desires, if I remember from the previous book. So if it's saying virtuous desires, those are limited, but desires that aren't virtuous, there's no limit to them. So you can think of, if you buy fancy things, you can always buy more fancy things. But if you are satisfied with the things that you have, then that's the virtuous side. And that has a limit. It's like, okay, I'm now satisfied. Same, I think, it's kind of like the junk food idea as well. But junk food, you could just eat and eat and eat. But if you eat vegetables and stuff like that, then you're satiated fairly quickly. Yeah. So, watch out for when the road doesn't seem to have a definite end.
Yeah. Now, that's actually... I mean... I've forgotten what book it was where it says, naturally we want to get from A to D, but then there is a definite path that to get there you have to go through B, C, then you get to D. But our natural instinct is like, nah, I don't feel like B, but then you take a detour somewhere, but it'll take you longer, but then you end up getting a D. So, like it says, like you might want to stay on path, as much as you wander off, at the end of the day, you are kind of hoping, I don't want to use the word chasing, but you're chasing one goal, But
yeah. I think the one on page 42, the letter kind of connects a little bit with the contentment side of things. On travel as a cure for discontent. So he says here, are you surprised, as if it were a novelty, that after such a long travel and so many changes of scene, that you have not been able to shake off the gloom and heaviness of your mind? You need to change your soul rather than the change of climate. And he goes on to say, Socrates made the same remark to one who complained. He said, why do you wonder that globe-trotting does not help you, seeing that you always take yourself with you? And then a bit later, you must lay aside the burdens of your mind. Until you do this, no place will satisfy you. And then there's the previous letter, kind of also as oh no, wait, sorry, that's a separate thing.
Oh.
There's a letter that came before it that I'll touch back on the good which abides, but there's letter 90 which ties back to it. So
I should say, before we move on, there's that last statement you read, you know, even if you travel, but if the problem is in your mind, you then take it wherever it is, so you might not actually escape it. You know, I think so often we say, "Oh, I want to travel to get away from all this and all that and all that," but we don't realize that some of the things we carry with us. So regardless of where we go, we actually taking everything with, you know, and it's very important to say, like, you have to first deal with that, you know, before you travel, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, traveling, it can be really nice, and you can enjoy it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, don't expect the travel to be the cure. It's not going to be the cure. You have to deal with yourself. And there's lots of things like that. I'm starting to realize, I think, that if you want to be, maybe it's not the right word for it, but if you want to be good at anything, so if you, for example, want to be a loving neighbor, or if you want to be a good leader, or if you want to be good at sticking with a goal that you've set for yourself, or if you want to learn about something, there's shortcuts that you can take, but most of the shortcuts are gonna cut you short, because what ends up happening is you stumble along the way or something like that, and it's because you actually, the thing that you need is not to get better at X or Y or Z. Looks like your recording ran into an issue. I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
But
is it my side or
see. Hopefully
I see it on both that new track was created, but yeah, let's see.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got the backup recording on our phones if we need to. But so what I'm getting at is that we can go down all these paths, but the thing that we actually need to do if we want to be a good husband or a good leader or a good X or Y or Z is we actually need to work on our character, our whole human, our whole person. And that's the thing that will allow us to be good at whatever it might be. Like if you want to start a restaurant and you want to have a really good restaurant, you might think, okay, I need to become a really good business person, or I need to become X, Y, Z. But the thing that I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm starting to think that the thing that would be best is the hardest thing, which is to work on your character as a whole human being. And then naturally the other things will most likely be fine, because if you're a nice person and you care about your staff and you care about the things that are being served in your restaurant and all of those kind of things, your restaurant's probably going to be fine. Might be really difficult, and there's a whole bunch of things. Maybe a restaurant's a bad idea because a lot of them fail, but you get the point. Okay, should we go on to the next one, letter 33 on page 45, on the futility of learning maxims. So I'll read this, and this is actually, sorry, the one that references back, but I'll read this and then we can go back. But so on 46 he says here, for this reason, give over hoping that you can skim by means of epitomes, the wisdom of distinguished men. Look into their wisdom as a whole, study it as a whole. They are working out a plan and weaving together line upon line a masterpiece from which nothing can be taken away without injury to the whole. And then he says, for man, however, whose progress is definite, to chase after choice extracts and to prop his weakness by the best known and the briefest sayings and to depend upon his memory is disgraceful. It is time for him to lean on himself. He should make such maxims, not memorize them. This is what Zeno said. But what have you yourself said? This is the opinion of Cleanthes. But what is your own opinion? How long shall you march under another man's orders? They have exercised their memories on other men's materials, but there's one thing to remember, it is one thing to remember and another to know. Knowing, however, means making everything your own. It means not depending on the copy and at all time glancing back to the master. Then he says, how long shall you be a learner? From now on, be a teacher as well. But why, one asks. Should I have to continue hearing lectures on what I can already read? The living voice, one replies, is a great help. And then he concludes with, the truth will never be discovered if we rest contented with the discoveries already made. Besides, he who follows another not only discovers nothing, but is not even investigating. What then? Shall I follow in the footsteps of my predecessors? Shall I indeed use the old road? But if I shall indeed use the old road. But if I find one that is a shortcut, and that makes smoother travel, I shall open a new road. Men who have made discoveries before us are not our masters, but our guides. Truth lies open for all. It has not yet been monopolized. So, I didn't read it super clearly, but I think one of the key points is we shouldn't just be picking up little sentences and phrases and stuff like that. If one wants to really grow in character, one should spend time reading and rereading things or learning from people as a whole, which I think goes back to why they said in previous parts that you want to actually learn from people. Yeah. So the reason why Plato and all of them, etc., did so well is because they were right there with people that were teaching them, and then they taught people who then taught other people. But if we just sort of pick up little sayings, we might sound clever, but we actually, it's like a hollow thing. It's not forming our actual character.
Yeah.
Before I jump back to the previous thing, I don't know if you have any comments there, Peter.
No, I don't. But yeah, it was just one thought I have. It's there's the whole thing of we don't need to experience everything. We can learn from other people's experiences and kind of make a decision whether we need to experience them or not, which is exactly what you're touching on now. But yeah, that's the only thing I needed to add.
Cool. Yeah, so in the previous letter, which is on the good which abides, so the good which endures, they kind of Seneca kind of talks about this guy who his name is Clavius Sabinus, and just the way that he approached life and how it was not a good way. So he says here, Within our time, there was a certain rich man named Clavius Sabinus, or Flavius Sabinus. And then he goes on to say, nonetheless, did he desire to appear learned. He devised this shortcut to learning. He paid fabulous prices for slaves, one to know Homer by heart, another to know Hesiod. He delegated a special slave to each of the 9 lyric poets. And then Seneca says, this matter cannot be delegated to someone else. So basically, this is almost like an extreme case of learning maxims, where it's almost the equivalent of Google or those kind of things, and saying, well, I have Google and therefore I know everything. But knowing something, I think it's touched on in other letters, but knowing something or being aware of something and having it actually be a part of you is 2 different things. And the thing that we want is to have it be almost like a part of us, like it's part of our character. It's not just like a saying that we're aware of. Yeah.
I mean, interesting you say that. Those podcasts I was listening to, I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. But yeah, they were saying how we're a generation with a lot of knowledge at our disposal, but we're not knowledgeable. That's... and I mean, the difference seems very slim, but it's that thing of where we have a lot of knowledge, but we haven't gone the extra mile to actually absorb all that knowledge and actually on the fly know what's going on. And yeah. And like you say, and it's an equivalent of where saying, I have Google in my pocket, therefore I know everything.
Yeah, there's that. I think it's a fictional story, but the story of I think it's a tsunami that's coming, and this kid is standing on the beach, and then they see the signs of this tsunami coming, and they tell everyone to get off the beach, and eventually everyone gets off the beach and is saved. But if the kid didn't actually know the signs, if he was just able to Google them or something like that, then it would not have been able to save him and the rest of the people. And I think it's a helpful example, real or not, or distorted in whatever way. But I think it's a helpful example, illustration, where there's a real tangible difference between being able to get some fact versus actually understanding it deeply so that you can apply it in real life. And applying it actually, not just having the knowledge to apply it, but actually applying it. Cool. Then the next one that I've got a note for is, I think, page 135. If there's something in between there that you want to chat through.
I have something in between, but I kind of already spoke about. So it's on 74, which is quiet and study. But yeah, the main point was the one that I made earlier, that we might want to be in a sort of quietness and stuff, but that's the time in which our minds wander. It's so on page 76 it says, "Real tranquility is the state reached by an unperverted mind when it is relaxed." Think of the unfortunate man who could sleep by surrendering his spacious mansion to silence. Who that his years may be disrupted by no sound. So I'll just read up to that. And then next was, you need not suppose that the soul is at peace when the body is still. Sometimes quiet means disquiet. That line I really liked, that sometimes it's just so loud in our heads, that even when we want that peace and quiet, we don't get it. I mean, I've never suffered from insomnia or anything, but there are times when I struggle to sleep, and it's like, why is it that I can't sleep? It's like, it's so still and quiet, but just within you, it's just so loud that you can't even fall asleep. That was just something. And then later on, I know it's kind of against, but I guess it's just highlighting or quiet and study. But later on page 76, it goes on to say, the much occupied man has no time for wantonness, and it is an obvious commonplace that the evil of leisure can be shaken off by hard work. So it's, again, what I was saying earlier, it's that common saying that says, an idle mind is the devil's playground. And I think this also says to that if you're hard at work, no evil leisures actually occupy your head, your mind, I think that was all that stood out from that letter.
No, I think it goes back to that, just having a strong character that you've built up over time is helpful in various different ways, because it helps to be able to calm your own mind and settle down and not be as disturbed by outside noises and noises inside of your own head, whether it be actual distractions or whether it be thoughts that you're ruminating on, all those different possible distractions.
And then the next one, sorry, I had one also in between. So that was on drunkenness. I would just kind of like, I won't read sections, but I might just highlight some things that stood out for me. I think in the first section it talks about how it's an opinion, but that drunk men are not trustworthy, and we need to have trustworthy men. It goes back to, I think it was in this section, actually on friendship, that you cannot really, there's some people that you consider friends, but there's certain things that you cannot tell. And I think this kind of relates to that, where it says, the problem with people that are drunk is that when they're not in their sober mind, they tend to blabber around. And they had also like a whole definition of what it means to be, like, where the word drunkenness stems from in this case. There's the instance of getting drunk now and again, not condoning being drunk, but then they also say there's the whole thing of those people that are functional alcoholics. And it kind of also speaks into people's characters, that if someone's constantly drunk, then there's a problem. But he then let us know that the only problem is the other people in society. And we get this a lot of the times that, I am a functional alcoholic. And that there are certain people that are functional alcoholics. But at the same time, that's not good. We don't need to kind of condone a bad behavior. We need to be able to stand firm against that. Another thing that stood out, but I think those were pretty much the main point. I think in most part it was just saying how the idea around drunk people are the ones that spill secrets. But I think it also kind of later on really tied it in with kind of instant gratification, to be like there are times when you actually need to derive yourself from certain things. And I think we've spoken about it in previous chats that we've had around books, so that we're a generation that cannot, how can I say, delay the gratification. They want things now and now, and that's one behavior that's amplified when one's drunk. Later in this section, it also talks about how a man can ponder on either thoughts, but can kind of have the will to fight against it. But when they're drunk, that strong will kind of falls away and actually acts upon whatever evil that comes into their head. So I think that was also that's also an idea that I think we need to kind of think of. It's I think so often we brush it off, but and I mean, so often you hear people say sober man's thoughts are drunk man's action. I think that should have stemmed from this, because they do say that when you kind of drunk, your guard is sort of down, and then you actually act upon all your thoughts, and not everyone's thoughts are pure, and if you act upon all of them, then you tend to act on the evil ones. But that's just some of the things I wanted to touch on from this section.
Yeah, I think especially nowadays with the instant gratification side of things, it's very difficult to grapple with that.
Oh.
And then it's definitely something to be wary of with the what did you say? A sober man's thoughts are the drunken man's actions. It's a very helpful maxim to keep in mind. Yeah. Cool. Should we run to the page 135 on letter 90? So, on the part played by philosophy in the progress of man. And then I actually don't have anything on page 135. I have notes on 141, which is, at first luxury began to lust for what nature regarded as superfluous, then for that which is contrary to nature, and finally she made the soul a bondsman to the body, and bade it to be an utter slave to the body's lusts. Then he says, "It's hard to believe, my dear Lucilius, how easily the charm of eloquent wins even how easily the charm of eloquence wins even great men away from truth." So if for that first part, if you replace the word nature with something like virtue, then what he's saying is we first have a desire for something that we don't really need. Then we have a desire which is opposite to something that's virtuous. And then finally we just completely give in to our base desires rather than going towards virtue. So I think with the title on the part played by philosophy in the progress of man, if we don't study or surround ourselves with people that are trying to be virtuous and grow in that, which I think is loosely, like very, very loosely, or maybe it's a part of what, when they use the word philosophy, it's a part of it. So if we don't do that, then there's the danger of basically veering towards our body's lusts. And lusts, I think, is more like desires, not just the way that we use the word commonly today. But yeah, it's like a desire for things that aren't virtuous, the opposite of virtuous. Yeah. That is it from that letter. Should we go on to the next one?
Yeah. I think I have one more after this. I don't know. What was your last one?
I have two more. The letter 108 on page 175, and then 123 on page 201.
Okay.
If you have one before 175, then we could do that.
No, I have one in between. It's the On Style's Mirror of Character.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, page 175. The letter is titled On Approaches to Philosophy. So he says, this eagerness to learn with which I see you are aflame should be regulated so that it may not get in its own way. Things are not to be gathered at random, nor should they be greedily attacked in mass. One will arrive at the knowledge of the whole by studying the parts. The burden should be suited to your strength, nor should you tackle more than you can adequately handle. Absorb not all that you wish, but all that you can hold on. Then he goes on to say, he who studies with the philosopher should take away with him some good thing every day. He should daily return home a sounder man, or in that way become sounder. And then lastly he says, he that walks in the sun, though he did not walk for that purpose, must need become sunburnt, which is a fancy way of saying can become sunburnt. He who frequents the perfumer's shop and lingers even for a short time will carry with him a scent of that place, and he who follows the philosopher is bound to derive some benefit therefrom, which will help him even though he be remiss. So it kind of touches nicely on a few different things that he's mentioned before. One is the whole idea of the learning maxims alone is a bad idea. The other is being discursive in reading, so jumping back and forth between things. He says, don't do that. He also says, if you want to learn something, don't jump around, but also don't try and do too much, because you can't learn everything. So kind of just accept that and focus on learning things that are within your ability to learn. Don't take on things that you can't yet understand. And then that whole idea of just being around people that are virtuous and learning from them. So, for example, if we look at the whole idea of walking in the sun, we're gonna become sunburnt if we do that for long enough, which obviously is not a nice thing. But then on the flip side, if we spend time with people who are virtuous, we're much more likely to become virtuous. So, he who follows the philosopher is bound to derive some benefit therefrom. I don't know if you want to go through the other letter that you mentioned.
Yeah, so it's just the one right after. It's on Star as a Mirror of Character. So the one of the sections says, I know I was starting in the middle. It says for answer, here is a phrase which you won't, this in the popular speech, on which the Greeks have made into a proverb. Man's speech is just like his life. Exactly as each individual man's actions seem to speak, so people's styles of speaking often reproduce the general character of the time. If the morale of the public has relaxed and has given itself over to effeminacy. So it kind of talks about how the way different people speak can kind of help you determine what their character is. I know I read one snippet, but it also carries on to how people are dressed, kind of. Also, is an indication of someone's character. It's a bad example, but it was like, someone that's crazy would dress in a particular way, and instantly by looking at them, we kind of say that this person is crazy. But also the flip side with that is that someone can look a certain way, but then once they open their mouth, it's something completely different. But he kind of says that you gives a man a few minutes and you should be able to tell the character. That's one thing that was mentioned. Let me see if there was anything else. But yeah, that was pretty much the general gist of that section. It was one of the longer chapters, but yeah, I've kind of just done a summation of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We like balancing that like first impression of someone, but I think it is generally true that like the way someone represents themselves is related to their character. Although there can be flaws with viewing it like that, because it's not always like that, and there's edge cases and stuff like that. But it is often, which I think is why it's like become a thing where it's like the person who's dressed as crazy is crazy, because it's even though it might not be that way in all cases, it does like humans. It's helpful for humans to make quick assessments on things, even though it can be really bad to do it sometimes. So I think if we make a quick assessment, it's something that we should be very cautious of and aware of, that's what we're actually doing. But at the same time, it's, that style and character thing, the way that someone is at first glance, even though it's not always the way that they are as a whole, can give us interesting insights. Cool. Then my last one is on page 201, the conflict between pleasure and virtue. So he says, and this is letter 123, he says, nothing is heavy if one accepts it with a light heart, and nothing provokes one's anger if one does not add to one's pile of troubles by getting angry. A great step towards independence is a good-humored stomach, one that's willing to endure rough treatment. And then he says, how many things are superfluous we fail to realize until they begin to be wanting. We merely use them not because we need them, but because we have them. And how much do we acquire simply because our neighbors have acquired such things, or because most men possess them? Many of our troubles may be explained from the fact that we live according to a pattern, and instead of arranging our lives according to reason, we are led astray by convention. It is not easy to rid the memory of a catchy tune. It stays with us, lasts on, and comes back from time to time. Accordingly, you should close your ears against evil talk, and right at the outset too. For when such talk has gained entrance, and the words are admitted into our minds, they become more shameless. So, if we're looking at the way that we should be and act, is we should accept things with a light heart, and not take things too seriously when people try and offend us, or we are tempted to get angry or upset, but rather to have a good-humored stomach, as you would put it. And then also to not be led astray by convention. I think it kind of extremely loosely ties back to the whole like crowds idea, and the other idea of spending time around things. So he says, many of the troubles may be explained by the fact that we live according to a pattern, and instead of arranging our lives according to reason, are led astray by convention. So the things that we look around and we say, oh, that's the norm, and then we want those things, or we act in those ways, because if we've spent enough time around them, they become, his analogy, like music in our ears.
Yeah.
We almost struggle to shake them off. The tune just keeps coming back. And so our minds end up being consumed by those things and those patterns, those conventions. Difficult to avoid, but that's why we should continue to try and, in their words, learn philosophy in simpler terms, be a virtuous person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In conclusion, as you put it.
Yeah. Do you have any final comments, Peter?
Final comments is that I think just like the previous letters we read, there are so many God nuggets that I think require you going over and over again. The language is a little difficult to understand. You might need to read over a few things one or two times, but I should say it's something that I think they always say, as much as we always say, oh, it's a modern world, but there's certain fundamentals that haven't changed over years, and I think this was a good highlight of that. I think we referenced a lot of sayings, and we're like, oh, there's this saying that we still use now, and in the letter, it's kind of the idea is laid out. Just like every other book, if you have a chance, get a copy and read it. It's not for everyone. I don't think it's for me, but at the same time, I think I've gotten to understand. I've gotten to enjoy the last two books that we've read. Let me rephrase that. I didn't think it was for me, but I'm happy to give it a chance.
I think similarly for me, it's something where it's a really difficult book to read. I'm not going to lie or sugarcoat it. I think also the language is a little bit foreign, as you would have heard from some of the little snippets that we read. But I think if you strip that away and you just look at the ideas that they're grappling with, like you said, Peter, it's things that we grapple with today. It's things that they grappled with 2,000 years ago. This book was written 2,000 years ago. I think, interestingly enough, Seneca, I think, was a contemporary of Christ, which is a fun fact, if I've got my facts straight. And so, it's things that they grappled with back then. It's probably things that people grappled with even before that. And it's interesting to reflect on those same ideas, and one might think, 2,000 years later, that people would have come to terms with these ideas and be like, yeah, of course, that's an obvious thing. But it turns out it's really difficult to be a wise and virtuous person, which is why, as Seneca would put it, like, take one idea a day from these philosophers, teachers, or just people that are around you, and really like digest that idea and reflect on it and make it a part of you, and then slowly grow. To go back to the book we every now and again reference, the Atomic Habits, slowly let it compound so that you become a more virtuous person, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, James.
Our first, what do you call it, remote
recording
podcast. Well, we'll try it again next time in a month.